Today we're making a strappy top out of an old pair of leggings. So you might need an unpicker, but probably not. Some fabric scissors, a needle and thread, preferably the thread should be the same color as the jeans, but I didn't have a matching one, and the legs of an old pair of jeans. So I'm starting out by unpicking the legs of the jeans so that I have one nice flat piece of material, or well, two because there's two legs. And really, you don't need to unpick this. I don't know why I always unpick things instead of just cutting it, but you can just cut along this seam. It will save you some time because we're not going to use the seam anyway. So now that we've got a nice flat piece of material, it's time to start cutting out our strips. So we want 4 strips that are a bit wider than the other ones. I'm making these about 1.25 inches wide. So I'm cutting out the first one and then using that as a template for the other ones by just pinning it to the next piece of fabric and then cutting along the edge and then pinning it again and cutting along the edge until I have 4. And these are going to be the ties for the top. So 2 of them will be the tie that goes around your neck like a halter top, and the other 2 will be the ties that go around your waist or your rib cage, however far down you want this top to go. Once I've got 4 pieces, I'm stitching 2 of them together in the center to make one really long strip, and this is the one that's going to go around the rib cage and tie at the back. So once you've stitched it together, this piece should be long enough to go around your rib cage and for you to be able to tie it at the back. If for any reason it's not long enough to do that, then you could cut another strip the same size and stitch that onto one end of this long strip, and then hopefully that will be long enough. Now we need to cut out the other strips, the ones that are going to go across the front. And I'm making these about 3/4 inch wide, and I'm doing the same thing. So I'm cutting out the first one and then using that as a template to cut all of the other ones out. So just pin it onto the fabric and cut along the edge of that, and then pin it onto the next bit of fabric, cut along that. And I cut out about 10 strips, but I only ended up using 6 of them. So cut out however many you think you'll need for your design. So now that we've got all our strips, it is time to figure out how this is going to look. So I'm starting with the strip that's going to go along the bottom of the rib cage under the bust, and I'm pinning the center point to the center point of the dummy where it's going to sit. Then I'm wrapping it around and tying it in the back. Then we're going to take the other 2 wider strips and position those. So these are like a halter, so they're going to tie around the back of the neck. And at the bottom they'll attach to the strip that's around the rib cage. So position these however you want, however far you want the top to come out, and pin them to the strip at the bottom and just try and get it symmetrical on each side, so the same distance from that center point. Then tie that up at the neck, and this is kind of the foundation of the top. So now we're going to take all of our other thinner strips and start positioning them. And I like them to go behind the wider strip, but you could have them hanging at the front if you prefer. So all I'm doing is threading one side of the thin strip under each side of the halter strip, and then moving it around until I find a position that looks good, and then pinning it onto those halter strips to hold it in place. And please excuse my big head being kind of in the way of this process a little bit. And I'm going for a very asymmetrical design, so I'm not worried about symmetry and making everything match up. I want that kind of, strips crossing over each other and everything looking a little bit thrown together. Once I'm happy with how it's looking on the dummy, I actually take it off and try it on very carefully so as not to stab myself with pins. And then you can make any final adjustments, make sure everything is fitting how you want it to, everything sits nicely. Then once that's done, it is time to start stitching everything together. If you have a sewing machine, then this will be much quicker and neater. But I'm just sewing it with hand because I don't have the right needle for this for my sewing machine. So if you are doing it by hand like me, I'm just doing very, very small stitches along the edges of the strips where they meet so that they're held in place but you don't really see the stitches from the front. The main reason I don't want to see the stitches at the front is because I'm a bit messy when it comes to hand sewing and I can't do straight lines. So if you're more skilled and patient and you're hand sewing this, you could do it with like a contrasting thread, or if you're using a sewing machine, it could look quite cool with a contrasting thread. If you want to avoid sewing completely, then you could use studs or something and just put a stud wherever the strips of fabric cross over each other. And then you'd have studs going up the two sides of the halter, and that would hold everything in place, and that would look quite cool. I didn't have any studs either, otherwise I would have done that and saved myself some sewing time. Once it's all stitched together, pop it back on your dummy or back on yourself, and with all these bits that are hanging down the side, you can leave them how they are. You could trim them a bit, you could cut them off completely if you just want the top to end with the halter straps. It's really up to you how you decide to finish this off. I'm keeping all of these hanging threads at the moment, but I may end up cutting them off. But for now I'm just trimming them so they look nice and even on both sides. So I hope you like it, guys, and I will see you next time. Bye!